Good afternoon. Welcome to This Week in Turkey. An Istanbul prosecutor has sought life in prison for 16 defendants, including philanthropist and businessman Osman Kavala, journalist Can Dündar, and actor Mehmet Ali Alabora on charges of attempting to overthrow the government.
The Istanbul Chief Public Prosecutor's Office delivered yesterday the indictment against 16 defendants to the Istanbul 30th Heavy Penal Court. The indictment asserts that the defendants have prepared for the Gezi Park protests since 2011 and 16 people constitute the top management. Osman Kavala, who has been in custody for more than a year, is accused of links to the 2013 Gezi Park protests and the failed coup attempt of July 2016. President Recep Tayyip Erdogan has accused Kavala of financing terrorists during the Gezi protests. Erdogan has described Kavala as the Turkey representative of Hungarian-born American billionaire George Soros and accused him of using his means to support those trying to tear up this country. In November last year, Soros's Open Society Foundation said it would cease activities in Turkey. Kavala was remanded in pre-trial custody on November 1, 2017. He is the chairman of Anadolu Kültür Foundation.
Consumer confidence in Turkey fell for a third straight month in February, sliding back near the lowest in a decade.
On Thursday, the Turkish Foreign Ministry slammed the vote by the European Parliament Foreign Affairs Committee calling for the suspension of EU accession negotiations with it. The Foreign Affairs Committee called on the European Commission and Member States on Wednesday to formally suspend EU accession negotiations with Turkey, citing disregard for human rights and civil liberties, influence on the judiciary, and disputes over territory with Cyprus and other neighbors. It is absolutely unacceptable that the non-binding advisory draft report is calling for a total suspension of our accession talks to the EU, Turkish Foreign Ministry spokesman Hami Aksoy said in a statement. Turkey says EU membership remains one of its top strategic goals, even though the accession talks, formally launched in 2004, have been stalled for years. Some EU leaders and officials have called for them to be ended. My expectation is that in 2 weeks a large majority of the EP will vote for the suspension of accession talks with Turkey, as EP Foreign Affairs Committee did today. EU Rapporteur on Turkey, Kati Piri, said in a tweet on Wednesday, referring to the European Parliament. In October, President Tayyip Erdogan said he would consider putting Turkey's long-stalled bid to join the European Union to a referendum, signaling exasperation with a process he says has been waylaid by prejudice against Muslims.
Consumer confidence in Turkey fell for a third straight month in February, sliding back near the lowest in a decade.
According to the data, the Consumer Confidence Index for February is at 57.8%, down by 0.7% compared to the previous month. The details show that pessimism stems mostly from unemployment fears, as the future-looking expectations about the Turkish economy are weaker. The Turkish Statistical Institute also announced that the house sales in January faced a significant fall. Turkey saw 72,937 house sales in January with a 24.8% annual fall, Turkstat announced. According to the monthly figures, 31,048 newly built houses were sold, while the rest were second-hand sales last month. The mortgaged house sales across the country has gone down by 77.2% on a yearly basis. Meanwhile, the credit rating firm S&P Global has published an update report on Turkey. According to the report, S&P expects the Turkish lira to fall steadily for the next 3 years and the level of bad bank loans to double to 8% in the next 12 months. The Japanese carmaker giant Honda, on the other hand, announced that it will cease the production of its Civic sedan model vehicles at its Turkey plant. Honda is also closing the Swindon factory in the UK as part of its plans to restructure its global manufacturing network.
Joining us today to evaluate the state of the Turkish economy only 40 days before the March 31st local elections is Hande Akmehmet, who is a US-based economist and the president of the Hologram Network. Good afternoon, Ms. Akmehmet. Welcome once again to This Week in Turkey.
Good afternoon. Hello.
So let's start with some numbers that we've just heard in our previous news video, namely the most recent statistics announced by the Turkish Statistical Institute. So the figures suggest that consumer confidence has dropped significantly in Turkey for the month of February, that is. And for the month of November 2018, unemployment has risen to 12.3%. So judging by this data, what's your overall evaluation of the state of the Turkish economy at the moment?
Sure. The unemployment rate climbed from 11.6% in October to 12.3% in November, rising for a 7th straight consecutive month. This was the highest level since early 2017. Moreover, the youth unemployment, which is also critical, and we're definitely overviewing the youth unemployment, changes in youth unemployment as well. Youth unemployment is also very high, 22%, which puts Turkey in the top 5 highest unemployment rates among the rest of the OECD countries, following South Africa, Greece, Spain, Italy, and Portugal. When we look at underlying factors causing the unemployment rate in Turkey, we can actually find 3 main structural causes, which can also be interlinked. One of them, the first one, is the layoffs due to the liquidity challenges. Due to the current economic conditions in Turkey, currency fluctuations that we have experienced, and high inflationary features, the cost of financing and the cost of borrowing has increased tremendously. Due to these factors, many companies that were already struggling started laying off staff publicly, as well as silently. The number of unemployed people stands at 4 million right now, according to the recent November numbers. The second one is the layoffs due to the changes in the bankruptcy laws. Erdogan's party changed the bankruptcy postponement laws in Turkey, called flood of what we call concordato filings instead. Concordato filings refer to court-sanctioned agreements that allows struggling companies to try and avoid full bankruptcy by restructuring their debt. These filings have actually skyrocketed last year, with companies not in distress also filing it and laying off employees in parallel in order to actually minimize their expenses and postponing their level. As a result, there were over 1,500 to 2,000 applications filed by the end of 2018, which actually contributed greatly to this employment becoming so high. The third main cause or dynamic is the quality of Turkey's labor force participation rate. Right now, the labor force participation is 54% in Turkey, which is the worst among all of the OECD countries. This is an alarming number, not just for me, but for most of the economists out there, signaling that more than half of the working age population actually jobless. So the government must definitely the necessary long-term measures to overcome these challenges, or factors will just keep contributing to the unemployment number.
Mm-hmm. So you've just presented us a very concise summary of the structural causes causing the current economic situation right now. But let's continue with the social implications of this economic turmoil, so to speak. A very popular news item in Turkey at the moment is the government's new initiative to run discounted fruit and vegetable stalls in the capital city of Ankara and Istanbul. This new measure is seen as a remedy for the soaring food prices in the country. But my question to you is, could this be a lasting, long-term remedy?
Mm-hmm. Well, the inflation in food prices stands at a whopping 31% right now. It's 31. This is the highest number since 2004. And why? Bad weather conditions are cited, among other things. However, the primary reason is the disruptive pricing dynamics in Turkey. And this is the result of an economic policy not working properly, supporting the production side of the economy, as well as the central bank not acting sufficiently as it should be with the tools that it has. Now, let's look at the prescription the government is trying to solve this problem with. I mean, selling fruits and veggies at 50% lower prices at two main cities in Turkey, Istanbul and Ankara, and now expanding to Bursa, Balıkesir, Elazığ, totals up to 5 cities now, and a maximum of 3 kilograms per person is allowed. So when you think about it from a macroeconomic perspective, the percentage of price control, and this is a price control, is just so low when we think about the overall size of the green grocery market, throughout Turkey. Therefore, I don't expect any significant contribution to the inflation numbers by this measure at all. Actually, it is not even considered a short-term solution. It's a daily solution, maybe even a weekly solution. But another important thing that we should also be pointing out is that with this measure, the government is actually intervening to the free market economy in such a direct and controlling way. This is also disturbing from a market's perspective, but it is the opposite of economic liberalization. This reminds us of the times back in 1970s where previous governments have actually endorsed price control committees, overviewing, approving, and sometimes even rejecting the changes in prices. Many of our parents, I'm sure yours do too, still talk about long lines, that people actually formed waiting to get sugar, light bulbs, and cigarettes, and some other items. And these were the items that the government set ceiling prices, meaning that they could not be sold at a higher price. Therefore, instead of all these measures, there are so many other ways of providing cultural support through government stimulus, trade support, government assistance to farm directly, which could all be policies primarily targeting the farmers and the producers who should be the main beneficiaries of these government actions.
Mm-hmm. And let's now focus on the currency aspect of the ongoing crisis. The US dollar for some time now has been trading at more than 5 liras. And we rarely continue talking about this, actually. So has Turkey come to terms with perhaps its current currency crisis?
So in terms of the currency world, for us, when evaluating the currency markets, it's all about relativity. Therefore, we should also look at the performance of our counterparts, such as the Brazilian real, Indonesian rupiah, Indian rupee, South African rand, among other currencies. So if Turkey, it's extremely simple. If Turkey's story falls behind its counterparts, we should expect a more differentiation. If Turkey actually manages to create a more powerful, positive story than its peers, then we should definitely expect a positive differentiation. I should also add that this positive story implementation will definitely need to start with, one, a substantial judiciary reform right now, hand in hand with another substantial constitutional reform, and thirdly, maybe an economic reform agenda that actually includes structural, long-term plans and commitments. This is the only recipe that will turn the tide in the Turkish depreciation. Also, we should also mention the two big macro threats, the dollar and the high interest rates coming from the US, are also diminishing due to the slowdown in global growth. This can actually provide a little breathing room for the emerging market economies. Countries such as Argentina, South Africa, Nigeria, these are the countries that might face some risks from the upcoming elections. Turkey is also one of them. We will hold the local elections in March, which increases our country's risk sentiment. On the other side, though, China, Indonesia, Czech Republic, Brazil, and maybe even Peru are on the other side. They're offering high-yield currencies with sustainable levels of debt and earnings growth, as well as their monetary and fiscal capabilities to counter a cooling of their economies. So we should be watching out where we stand relatively to these other currencies.
Mm-hmm. You're a Washington-based economist, so how do you think the Turkish economy right now looks from an international point of view? In other words, how do you think foreign investors view Turkey right now?
Mm-hmm. Debt levels, earnings growth, and current account deficit, these are still very, very important indicators they're looking at. And not just from a macroeconomic perspective, but also from a market perspective. The world's largest asset managers overseeing $60 billion in emerging market assets are actually stalling or avoiding their Turkey investments at the moment. The political development side of the current account deficit, even though the final number is contracting, is providing a red flag for them. The current account deficit is contracting, but the quality of financing that the current account was financed with is so much more important than the actual number itself. And the fact that with the recent numbers, we've seen the $27.6 billion of deficit in Turkey has actually depended on a $21 billion of hard currency inflow that actually came from unidentified resources that are categorized by the central bank as net errors and omissions, net hata noksan. So we have actually previously seen several billions of inflow on a monthly basis. This number, the $1 billion, is definitely a record high number, and this happened in 2018. When we look at the rest of the financing, other than the net errors and omissions, it came from the central bank's own reserves. So this actually provides a setback for foreign investors. And the fact that the junk level in the sovereign credit rating so prevents big funds from entering the Turkish markets as well. So these are the issues that should be resolved come back.
Mm-hmm. Finally, Ms. Akmehmet, I'm pretty sure you've also followed multiple analysts, a number of analysts actually suggest that an agreement with the International Monetary Fund could perhaps show Turkey a way out of its ongoing economic crisis. And although President Recep Tayyip Erdogan has repeatedly suggested that this wouldn't be an option, how likely do you think the Turkish government would be to execute such an agreement if it was, in fact, ever reached with the International Monetary Fund?
The IMF actually continues its standard consultations with Turkey. But the fact that there is a hidden or something waiting in the woodworks of a hidden IMF agreement is certainly admitted, as far as I believe. The IMF has very standard procedures for applying grants. And even before these talks are initiated, a letter of intent that is drafted by our government has to go to the IMF before even these quotes and the numbers can actually be, talked about. I think the IMF agreement has politicized so much, that it just became like one of the symbols, a symboling factor, about the standing of the Turkish economy. But it's not necessarily a bad thing. A lot of countries actually work with the IMF, financing their debt, and getting back on track. So, from my understanding, if your macroeconomic indicators are derailed, this is just one of the ways of railing them back in. So it should not be it should be viewed as political as it is right now.
Thank you very much, Ms. Akmehmet, for being with us once again today and for your comments.
Thank you.
Today we were joined by Hande Akmehmet, who commented on the performance of the Turkish economy on the road to the March 31st local elections. And we'll continue with our next news video now. The Turkish parliament is set to elect a new speaker as the current head, Binali Yıldırım, has resigned from his post to run for Istanbul mayor in the upcoming elections.
Yıldırım was elected as parliament speaker right after the June 24th presidential and parliamentary elections. His resignation came after criticism from opposition parties who said he was violating the Turkish constitution, which bans parliament speakers from partaking in any political activity. Following his resignation, Yıldırım handed over his office to interim parliament speaker Celal Adan of the Nationalist Movement Party MHP. The ruling Justice and Development Party AKP and the MHP will continue their alliance for the parliamentary speaker elections, as the latter has already announced it won't present any candidates and will endorse the AKP's nominee. Meanwhile, the two separate alliances running in the March 31st local elections expanded their scopes in last-minute moves late Tuesday, as the initial lists of candidates have been submitted to Turkey's Supreme Board of Elections. The People's Alliance between the ruling AKP and the MHP has expanded further to cover 51 provinces out of 81. The MHP will present its own candidates in the southern provinces of Adana, Mersin and the Aegean province of Manisa, while the AKP will race in 27 metropolitan cities. As part of the new expansion, the MHP will endorse the AKP's candidates in the metropolis of Istanbul, the capital Ankara, the Aegean province of Izmir, eastern provinces of Erzurum, Ağrı, Van and Bitlis, the southeastern provinces of Gaziantep, Şırnak and Siirt, along with several others. The main opposition and Republican People's Party CHP and Good Party have agreed to cooperate in a total of 56 provinces. While their Nation Alliance will present joint candidates in 56 provinces, 24 out of which are metropolises, Good Party will propose its own candidates in 14 metropolitan cities and 30 provinces. Meanwhile, Burhanettin Kocamaz, who was running for the southern province of Mersin's metropolitan municipality on Good Party's ticket, has been registered as a Democrat Party candidate after election board did not ratify his mayoral candidacy because Good Party's provincial branch submitted his nomination after the 5 p.m. deadline in Tuesday evening. The People's Democratic Party, HDP, on the other hand, has decided not to race in 11 metropolitan cities, including the capital Ankara, the Aegean province of Izmir, the metropolis of Istanbul, the northwestern province of Bursa, and southern province of Adana.
U.S. President Donald Trump has nominated veteran diplomat David Satterfield to be the country's next ambassador to Turkey, the White House said last week.
64-year-old Satterfield has been the acting Assistant Secretary of State for Near Eastern Affairs since 2017. He has previously served as the Deputy U.S. Chief of Mission in Iraq, Ambassador to Lebanon, Director for Near Eastern Affairs on the National Security Council, as well as in Syria, Tunisia and Saudi Arabia. His appointment is not yet official, as he must be confirmed by the Senate. The last American ambassador to Ankara was John Bass, who served from 2014 to 2017. Bass, who is the incumbent U.S. ambassador to Afghanistan, left Turkey in October 2017 amid a visa crisis between Washington and Ankara. The post has been empty since then.
That's all from This Week in Turkey. Thanks for tuning in and hope to see you again next Friday at 5 p.m. Goodbye.